In this interview, we talk all about Game of Thrones with George R.R. Martin's co-author, Elio Garcia. We'll uncover the secrets behind the drama surrounding the House of the Dragon.
He feels that it's on the wrong path. He has tried behind the scenes to go through the typical chain of talking to those writers, of talking to HBO, of trying to get things on what he thinks is the right path.
Delve into George's struggle to publish The Winds of Winter.
Still very important to George. He's talked about his legacy, and he knows that this series is magnum opus.
Reveal the hidden truths about the canceled GOT prequel shows.
For every show that's gone to the air, 6 or 7 have died. So,
and break into the lore. Hello and welcome to CultureScape, the show that interviews the geek creators and influencers who built nerd culture. Today we're diving into Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin, House of the Dragon, Winds of Winter, with the someone who knows the answers to so many of the burning questions we all share. My guest today, I'm proud to announce, is Elio Garcia, a super fan, perhaps the super fan, a co-author and personal friend of George R.R. Martin. He and his wife, Linda Antonsson, take a guess, she's Swedish, started and run the popular fan site Westeros.org. They co-wrote 2 world books with George, The World of Ice and Fire and The Rise of the Dragon. I just finished reading them both. They're excellent. And they are his official fact checkers. Recently, for those who don't know, George R.R. Martin shared his concerns about the direction of the show House of the Dragon and the current status of Winds of Winter. So today we will discuss all this and more. Thanks for joining me, Elio, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
There's a level of being a fan, but I think if you're such a fan that you end up becoming friends with the author and you're like a coworker, I think that just puts you at the top. You're like maybe you're not the king of the nerds, maybe you're like the prince, but you're up there. You're somewhere in the upper hierarchy.
Yeah, I think George has previously referred to us as his archmaesters. So we stumbled into it, pure luck. I mean, or not luck. I mean, we just loved his world. We loved his book. We decided to reach out when he was very accessible, and they kind of just took off from there.
Yeah, I listened to an interview you did a few years ago talking about your beginnings, and you guys got started, basically you and your now wife Linda. Back then you were friends. You were playing a Lord of the Rings like role-playing game over the internet. You want to tell us, like, how did this all get going? How did you go from guy that's kind of interested in fantasy books to where you're at now?
Yeah, I started on that game, Elend or Mush. Mush is a term for the kind of game. It was a multi-user shared hallucination is one common explanation for the abbreviation. The idea is that it's a purely text-based online game, and unlike the old MUDs, which was much more hack and slash through automated enemies, this was directly interacting with players, almost like a tabletop game where you would describe the actions of your character, and it would be almost like a collective storytelling, basically. And I started first, and Linda showed up, and then at somewhere along the way we started talking. And at the time, the only fantasy I really read was Tolkien. I had discovered him fairly late in high school, basically, but everything was Tolkien after that for me. And she's the one who started me reading upper fantasy, and she's the one who tried a Game of Thrones first after it came out in paperback, and convinced me to try it. At that point in time, I was sort of at the University of Miami in Coral Gables, and I was a double major in English and in history with a particular interest in medieval history. So This really worked really well for me. And at that point as well, we have been playing these games, not just that game, but some others. And we decided, we want to do a game of our own. So this would be a great setting for a game, right? We could play nobles and knights and ladies and King's Landing. But it was important for us to ask permission, to get permission from the author. So George's email address was very easy to find at the time because he posted on Usenet, and he had it on his very, very early website. Through email, we asked permission, like we explained what we wanted to do. We made our first version of Westeros.org, which was the idea would be a site for our players. So we had done some very simple, rough heraldry of the great houses, and I think that more than anything is what caught George's interest. He himself was a role player. His Wild Cards universe came out of a role playing game, and he talked to his lawyers, his publishers, and he came back to us eventually and said, "Sure." But he really liked the heraldry, and he said, these are great. I've always wanted to see how they would look, and here's some notes of a heraldry I've created. When I'm watching football games on Sunday, I'll just jot down and create them, and things kind of just steamrolled from there.
Yeah, I am I guessing here, but I think a lot of the heraldry that became the finalized version, some of those were ideas that you had worked with, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything. I mean, all the great houses were already revealed, but a lot of them were things where, like, there would be houses that George would send to us, and we would do them and send him our version. And say, "Oh, I don't that doesn't look at all as how I imagined. Let's try this." And so he would adjust them and change them um, to come out. And then a lot of these houses, some of these houses didn't show up until many years later in the Feast for Crows, or even I think in the Dance of Dragons. So that was like our first sort of early access, but due to our game as well, he ended up sharing history. He had around the time we had settled on the game, the time period was going to be in the reign of started the reign of Daeron the Young Dragon. George said, "Oh, I've kind of settled some Targaryen history recently, including that stuff. And here's my notes if you want to see it on that period." And we have we knew about the Blackfires basically before anyone else did. George kind of because it goes from Daeron all the way down to like the first Blackfire Rebellion, and it's like a year by year thing. It's primarily focused on Aegon the Rory's mistresses, but which he had many of them.
Mhm.
But it did go all the way down. It had all these things. So there are things in our game because we still run the game, Blood of Dragons. There are events that have happened or will happen where players didn't know, but they came from George until they were looked at the World of Ice and Fire, where we describe the same period and say, "Hey, this actually is canonical." They just didn't tell us because we didn't told George. We won't tell people. We'll use it. We won't let people know. They'll just have to guess. So yeah, we've been very fortunate, and George has been incredibly generous with us.
Yeah, no, it's such an amazing. If you are deep into these fandoms, the thought that because fandom almost always is like a one direction thing, but but in this case where it went the other direction, that's just so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
He sounds like a really good sport. He seems different than a lot of other authors I've heard about. Like he's really cool with it and wants to
Yeah, I
engage.
mean, well, the important thing about George is he started as a fan of a genre himself, as part of fandom, uh, comic book fandom, science fiction fandom. He went to the convention. He went to one of the first Comic Con. He went to, he started going to Worldcon every year, starting in the mid-70s as someone who was hoping to become a pro and then became a pro writer, and then became one of those people who was so. Fandom is a way of life for him, and I think he is extremely appreciative of fandom in a lot of ways. And I think authors who entered the genre without really having been part of fandom, haven't been going to conventions, have a very different sense. They treat it, a lot of them see it as much professional, a much more or a serious, where they'll interface. They appreciate their fans. They don't have quite the same appreciation. I think even now you're seeing it in this 21st century, where fan fiction has become such a gateway for so many writers to enter into writing professionally. They too have a very different sense. They have a much more connected and all more parasocial relationships with their
Mhm.
fans. George was, I think, unusual for his era to be so open and to be so interactive with fans.
Yeah, that kind of brings us to what's the big topic people have been talking about was earlier the month, I think September 4th, he come out with this blog post criticizing House the Dragon season 2, and my personal feelings was there were individual episodes I thought were really great, and there were a lot of elements that really worked, but it got the sense that where this thing was heading was almost antithetical in some ways to what the book Fire and Blood was trying to do, and I was like, wait a second. Like, hold on here. And it was, I admit, I did get a little Schadenfreude, and I did feel a little better when George is like, well, actually, I have a problem with this too. So I was like, okay, I already liked you, George. Now I like you just this much more.
Yeah, I have to be careful here on what I say. As I've said, I had lunch with George at the Worldcon in Glasgow in August, and he told me that he was planning to post about House of the Dragon, and he shared some of the things. Some of the things is what he posted. Some of the things he has not said. Uh, what I've said is that was something where, to me, it's an action of George, and this is me speculating because I didn't ask George like, why are you posting? I did kind of suggest like, are you sure that you want to post about it, George? I did kind of, but he said yeah, but so I think his feeling here is that he was acting because he feels that it's on the wrong path, and he has tried behind the scenes to go through the typical chain of talking to the writers, of talking to HBO, of trying to get things on what he thinks is the right path, and it hasn't worked. And he feels like maybe if I talk about it publicly, they'll take it more seriously than they have done, or how he thinks they have done. We'll see if anything changes. I think I agree with you. There's a lot of things to like about the show. It's beautiful. The production values are there. I love the attention to detail. The performances, I can't really complain about any performances. Everyone's great. There are parts of some of the ways they interpret some of the stories are not how I would have imagined is the best way to do it. And I think George's post kind of outlines just in one example of a number that he might discuss, shows how when he talks about the butterfly effect, he's really talking about the texture of the whole story. How A needs to B needs to C needs to D, and he's concerned about what, we're going to do D, George, but like B and C are gone, and he doesn't understand how we're going to do it. So as he said, he doesn't know if Ryan has solved some of the things that he will have to solve. He has no idea. So I think that's part of his concerns, that he doesn't really know. I mean, he sees the scripts. He was part of the writer's room for the second season. He chose not to be part of the writers' room for the third season, and it's really it's a very complicated situation. Unfortunately, I speak to Ryan Condal on occasion or communicate by email. Big fan of his podcast about the movie props with the writer David Mandel, which the sub screens are made of, and I will recommend it because it's really fun if you love 80s movies and prop collecting. But Ryan has been great, and I think he's a genuine fan. He's been reading the book since 2001 himself. He's a real fan. He's legit. Some people have questioned it. I can promise you, he has absolutely proven his bona fides to me. But he's a real fan of the books and has been for a long time. But at the same time, George is not his boss. HBO is his boss. And to what degree some of these issues that have come out, some of the differences of opinion have to do with the sort of different things tugging at the show, but it's not just the writers, but it's HBO. I mean, everyone knows. I mean, you're aware of the whole drama over the Warner Brothers Discovery merger and all the things going on with the huge debt load they're under and trying to save money and strange decisions about shutting down movies after they're done. People are there's a lot of complexity involved in the situation.
Yeah, then maybe Ryan Condal. I think, by the way, George's post was very polite, and the way he handled it was, for the most part, very professional. Because it's obvious, it's like, look, I'm going to take something that's very basic and make my point here, and then that's it. And then people, obviously, they'll interpret whatever they want to. But if you're going to come out and criticize and handle it, I think you handled it well. I think people have kind of put Ryan Condal as the face of all this, and maybe just a tad unfairly, because you are right, he doesn't have to answer to HBO. And it's very interesting, just this week, Deadline did an interview with HBO CEO Casey Bloys, and the interviewer did bring up George's comments, and he basically responds saying that fans were not divided, and that really the only one that had any problem with this was George. So that makes me think maybe you do have a point, that there might be marching orders or strong suggestions being sent down from corporate, and we just have no idea. The viewers, and so we're unfairly blaming the Ryan team. I know a favorite thing that I've seen on Reddit is everything and anything is blamed on Sarah Hess. I think I know more about this woman, I think, than her own mother at this point. So I know it can get a little deranged sometimes.
Yeah, I felt that the amount of attention she gets is, I mean, she is not the showrunner. Brian Condal is. The buck stopped with him as far as writing decisions go. If they have to compromise the story because of HBO, he's the one who decides ultimately how we're compromising it. That said, my understanding from the prominence she has in interviews and in behind the scenes is that she is very nearly like Ryan's equal or like he's very much his very like writing partner who really writes with him and works with him on a high level. She's the right hand, or she's the hand of the king. If he's the king, yeah, she's the hand of the king. So, you know, I was gonna quote that saying from the books, but I won't quote that one. But I will say that I think she gets too much attention in a lot of ways, too much hate. At the same time, I think there are things that she seems to be the focus of talking about them. About, for example, the Alicent Rhaenyra relationship, which a lot of people have questions about, like how prominent it is. I think she's certainly strongly supportive of that. But then Ryan himself said, like, I've always said from the outset, this is the center of the story. And I definitely understood that as being the center of the story in the first season. I'm started to question it being the center of the story in the second season when I saw the impact it was having, the butterfly effect of it. In particular, Jace, Rhaenyra's heir, he is definitely shunted to the side compared to how he is in Fire and Blood. And I thought, I don't want to spoil people, but like I think it's really important that he's not shunted to the side, because what happens down the line with him, it kind of depends on you having a strong connection. I don't think a lot of viewers are going to have a strong connection.
No, I agree. It's kind of like what happened, to the young prince that George was referring to the blog post, how they eventually will break Alicent and their side. The death of Jace and his brother is kind of what breaks Rhaenyra. And so it's like moving these things to the side. I think a common criticism, maybe you agree on this, the way Daemon was handled. Daemon is, George has said, his favorite character, at least that he's written for these books. And he was just, I don't know, man. He was stuck in Harrenhal. He just couldn't, just wouldn't let the man out. He was just stuck in that castle. So all he could do was like sleep and dream and complain.
Yeah, that one, that's the one. I mean, they did a fantastic job with the set. They really expanded the Harrenhal set. It really was spectacular. But it is one of those that made me wonder: is this a budget thing? Is this like we have only 8 episodes and we have to pick it? We've got Rook's Rest to do. This huge battle is going to cost a lot of money. Like, Daemon is only an extended bottle episode, basically, where he's just in Harrenhal. I thought that was unfortunate because his actual story, it would have been great instead of having all the lords show up to complain at him. It would have been cool seeing him doing more of what he did in Fire and Blood, which was that he was not messing up. He was actually collecting these people, convincing them, winning battles, taking hold of his castle. And I don't mind the idea that his methods, like the story is a lot about him not being suitable as a ruler because he's too high-handed, he's too hot-headed, he's too temperamental, and him kind of coming to terms with that. But I thought, especially is it the 8th episode or the 7th when young Lord Tully shows up and kind of, I mean, I thought it would, I would have met them 50%, but they kind of went to the point where he felt like he was just completely neutered. And I thought that this has gone well beyond what I felt comfortable with this character. But, I don't know. We didn't really discuss that, George and I, when we discussed things. I just made a passing reference, and I'm not sure that George was entirely on board with it either. But I would say I think I share a lot of concerns that you and other fans had. I thought it was a bit much, but it's hard to say when you don't know if it's HBO saying, like, you got to figure out how to keep some people in one location. I mean, a lot of people noticed that Corlys Morgan, he's got like one scene in his castle, and then the rest is like he's just at the docks. He's always at the docks. So, like,
that is true.
I mean,
yeah.
It's just
he really likes
nice
it
set
there.
and everything, but it kind of I thought it was sad that in particular Steve Toussaint got kind of pulled back. He had such a strong presence in the first season, I thought, and now he's kind of retreated into the background. And again, he retreated into the background for the same reason that Jace has retreated into the background, because Rhaenyra has become more central to her version of the story than she is to his part of Fire and Blood.
Maybe he just likes it down there, likes hanging out on the boardwalk.
Should.
Westeros, Coney Island or something. Yeah, it's one of these things. Yeah, I did really feel like Daemon was stuck in some kind of weird holding pattern.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know. I've seemed like a mistake to me, but
I mean, I enjoyed seeing the actors come back from the first season. The young Rhaenyra. Great to see Paddy Considine again. He's a fantastic actor.
He is.
I don't know if we needed 2 scenes of her. I think it was 3 such scenes of him. I would have probably have liked to see some more complexity to his interactions, or some more going out there, just to kind of capture more. But he's a man of action, and having him to sit in Harrenhal, he does not feel like a man of action. But again, when he sends Willem Blackwood out to harass and raid and harry and burn, it again feels like, well, we're doing that because it can be off camera. We don't have to show it. Someone else is doing it, and we can just be in the Harrenhal. So I did like his scenes with Alice. Those are really interesting as well. So I actually, the 8th episode, I was kind of blown away with them embracing the magic so strongly with the vision he had. And don't necessarily love everything he saw in the visions, because they may remind people of things about Game of Thrones they maybe didn't like at the end.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you see this figure, this pale person on this weirwood throne, to me, that's like one of the greatest moments we ever have had. We've been privileged to help George kind of proofread the books when he's done, and so we looked at Peace for Crows early, we looked at Dance of Dragons early, but in the Dance of Dragons, there's a scene where someone comes in a cavern and sees this pale lord wearing all black within the embrace of the weirwood roots, and Lynn and I knew immediately, like we were reading it together, like we knew immediately who it was, and we were like, it just blew our minds. So I don't want to spoil it for you if you don't know, or if your readers don't know, but it's just really cool, and I think hopefully the Night of the Seven Kingdoms will maybe expand on that for people.
I hope it's good. I love the Dunk and Egg stories. There's only 3 of them, but they are excellent. They are Georgia's finest, because they're very tightly paced. They're very direct. They have just enough kind of the world and lore building, and the character is a very likable person. And where in most Game of Thrones, you're coming from a level of, well, I'm an aristocrat. Dunk is here. He's at the bottom level. He's like living in what was like medieval English society, Westeros society. I just think it's fantastic. I love those stories so much. So I hope they do it well.
Yeah. George was very effusive. He visited the set for several days. He told me directly it was very faithful, and he had no concerns about it, and he liked it a lot. He thought it was really great. He thought the actors were fantastic. So I think it'll be good. I was a little disappointed to see in the trailer where they let about everyone's wearing like black armor. And I don't know if Targaryens do that, but they also wear surcoats, so colorful surcoats, and particularly when Prince Aerion Brightflame loves wearing oranges and yellows and reds. So I hope that's this trailer thing. It'll be a little brighter, because the whole mode of these stories is a bit lighter, a little bit more adventurous, a little more. It does eventually get into some darker areas, but it's not. It's a very different story. It feels more like, how Sansa envisions King's Landing when she's at the Hand's Tourney. It's all colors, it's all bright, and Night dies in front of her, and the blood is red on the sand, but it's magical almost. And there's something to that, but hopefully it'll be. I'm sad. I was hoping to visit myself the set when George did, but then I realized that George was going right when I was vacationing elsewhere, so I couldn't manage it. But maybe if there's a second season, that'd be great.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about working with George as a person. Did he live up to your expectations? What's your feel for the guy?
I think he's just as I said, he's been tremendously generous to us, and he's been incredibly helpful. I think we never imagined that we would work with him directly. I mean, at a certain point in time, he started realizing, hey, you seem to know more about my world than I do. And, it was when I visited my family, I moved in 1999 to Sweden, and I visited my family for the first time, went back to the US in 2004. And we did a cross-country trip because my sister helped me, and my parents were in Florida, my sister was in Florida, wherever. My sister was in Florida, my parents were in Las Vegas. So we went and moved her to Las Vegas as well. So I traveled with my family. And somewhere along the way, I realized, hey, we're close to Santa Fe, where George lives. And so I kind of called Linda, who called Paris, his now wife, who got George to call my payphone where I was at, and be on some rest stop in the highway, and arranged to meet and have dinner in Santa Fe. And I went to his home, and he was just very, very generous. And over dinner, that's where he said, I've got publishers asking me about doing some sort of world book, and I think I'm still writing these novels. I still got Feast for Crows, so I still have 7 books. Do you think you and Linda want to write it with me? I'm like, I'd have to ask Linda, but I think yes. So I recall as soon as I got to the hotel, Linda, it was very late, so it must have been like early morning in Sweden, but she was waiting by the phone basically to hear everything back from me, and we were both very excited. And it took a while, as these things do. 2006 when we signed the contract with the World Wide Fire. And the original plan was, well, George was going to work on it until he was done with Feast for Crows. But that took a while. Or rather, with A Dance with Dragons by this point. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. And suffice it to say, it took a long time for him to finish A Dance with Dragons. So we initially started, we wrote 80,000 words. The contract was 50,000, right? Mm-hmm. We just on our own, we could do like 80,000, but that included like a who's who, like a character encyclopedia, like you guide the characters. And the editor said, oh, this is too long to go. You have to cutting it. And like, well, what's the point of having it if it's not a fairly complete guide? But George has like a couple thousand characters, And then there was this app that at the same time that Random House was doing, and said, well, we could put it in the app. So that's great. We moved it to the app. We still had a bunch of words. And George finally was done. He finally started working with us on it. And he started writing these sidebars. The idea is he would do sidebars. He'd fill in some information where we had gaps. Like, we didn't know much about a lot of the eastern regions and so on. And some of the history of the areas we didn't know. So George would do a little sidebar. And the first sidebar came in, and that's Aegon's Conquest. That's like 6,000 words. And it just kept growing from there. So, now we have Fire and Blood. And that basically, I would say like 80% of Fire and Blood was written for the World Wide Fire. The only really new stuff was the Reign of Jaehaerys. And, so we would wake up in the morning and check our email, and there'd be some new stuff from George. And we'd go through it, we'd make our remarks, comments, we'd send it back to him and the editor. And then, a couple of days later, some new stuff came up, something else he had written. And so it was really interesting. Some of the stuff he did was stuff that we had already written, but he expanded on it. Some of the one of the funny ones actually is the Reign of Aegon V, where we had a conference call because that's falls into a Duncan Egg period and sort of his plans for Duncan Egg. And we had a conference call, and apparently he has like a folder with his notes about this period. And he said, oh, I'll see what I can share with you guys. And he would be going, no, I can't. No, can't share that with you. Or, well, yeah, okay, and he tell us something. I don't know if I want you to have it in the book, but And then, oh, that's nasty. Yeah, that's really nasty what these guys do. And I forgot about that. And one of my dogs is in the background. And the funny thing is, so we wrote it based on that, and he goes through it, and like pretty much everything he told us we couldn't put in, he ended up putting in anyways. So it contained more information than we envisioned it would have.
What's your dog's name?
This one is Lancelot. You have 2 boxers.
Nice.
We were actually in Denmark this past weekend. We show our dogs in sort of confirmation and kind of beauty shows. So we were in Denmark for a couple of shows for him and his older brother Winter. They are actually half brothers, but he is a very full of energy and is apparently wanting attention.
Of course, because you're trying to record. That's how it was.
Yes, exactly. It's like he wants attention. Lads, you cannot be up here. Give me 1 minute. Give me 1 second, Ken. Let me.
Yeah, you're fine.
I'll get him out of here.
I'm a crazy dog owner, so I understand.
Yeah. So George has been very generous with us, and was very great to work with. I don't know what I expected per se. I didn't expect him to write so much for us. The book ended up being, I think the book we published was like 180,000 words on what was originally a 50,000 word contract. And I think in total between us and George, we wrote over 300,000 words. So there was a lot of stuff that just we ended up basically editing down and compressing what he wrote to kind of fit it into the framework of the Voice of Fire. But that's why Fire and Blood had so much information that was needed because we couldn't fit it all in, so we had to cut it out.
You tell me if this is accurate or not. Just your experiences, George. It seems to be one of the best aspects of George is, I don't mean for this to come off rude. I mean this positively. He kind of goes by the seat of his pants. He's a Gardner writer, and I would not be surprised he has a little bit of ADHD or something. And so he will just get in these tangents, and that's where all these amazing, like all these details, and these world building, and all the stuff that we love about George, it comes from this. However, this is kind of the other thing. Someone like me who does have ADHD, I'm like, the guy is 75. I really want Winds of Winter.
76, actually. It's his birthday today. He's now 76.
Okay, well, happy birthday to George. Do you know him? Maybe you share this anxiety, and maybe this is also because I'm taking care of my elderly grandparents who are in the mid-70s. I'm thinking, like, is George going to finish the main book series before, we lose him to, the end of mortality? And it's not that I don't like these other books. I love Fire and Blood. I want the next half of that. Don't get me wrong. But if I had to prioritize, I think most fans would say, like, take that man, get a chain. Like you ever hear those terrible stories about, like, Elizabeth Bathory, and they're like, they put bricks. She could never leave the room. I mean, they're like, whatever it takes. And I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
To me, I think it's still very important to George. He knows he's talked about his legacy, and he knows that he's always talked of this series as magnum opus. I think what's happened more so than the sidetracking himself of over like the building out the details on it. It's as he's become more and more perfectionist. When he writes, he writes so much that he just throws away in the end because it's a dead end, or it doesn't meet what he feels like it should be. And I think that more than anything has been a problem for him. If he didn't care so much, he could probably just shrug his shoulders about. I mean, I've read other authors. There's a fantasy author who's wrote a very big series, the Malazan series, the Book of the Fallen, the Stephen Erickson. I love the first several books, and I kind of fell off. But everyone talked about the fact that even the hardcore fans, like, there are huge continuity problems in those books because Erickson, rather than let them stop him, he just barreled right through them. And then George did the same thing. He could no doubt get the books out, but for him, he can't do it. He has to try and line everything up and make everything fit together and have that the thematics and the texture of the story, the atmosphere has to fit with his standard. And what works for one author, doesn't necessarily work for another author. He's never been someone who can write outside of his house. That's not true. He when he finished Dance of Dragons, he now has like cabins somewhere in the mountains. He rented one where he was able to kind of settle in and feel comfortable. And there he did a lot of writing. So maybe he'll at some point decide to try that again. I don't know, but I because he's a friend. When the question comes, like, if he doesn't finish it, like, to me, I've got other problems. A friend has not managed to if something has stopped him, I feel but I feel that in the question of how can he get things on track, I think he's doing his best. I think maybe that post about all the HBO stuff actually reveals another problem, which is that things have not necessarily gone the way he wanted with that side of things, and that has been a huge stressor. That's maybe why he's posted about it. And I don't know, maybe we'll see if there's a resolution to that. That might change things. Like either he'll be less concerned about it for good reasons or bad reasons.
Okay. Do you mind if I push a few theories past you and hear? Because
Sure.
these are just common fan theories. Okay. For one, does George have a plan if something terrible happens to him? Does he have like? Well, because this is what happened. This seems to happen a lot lately in the last few years. You had like the people that worked on Dune, for example. They had to bring in. Oh, I'm drawing a blank right now. His son and
The other writer, yes, and Brian Herbert, and Robert Jordan obviously is the most famous recent example. A colleague of George's, a contemporary, who passed away tragically with his series undone, and Brandon Sanderson ended up completing it.
Thank you.
Notes.
Sanderson was the name I was looking for.
Yeah, Sanderson. George has in the past said, most everything is in his head. So if he were to drop dead,
God
tomorrow,
forbid, I do not want this to happen.
But I think he recently addressed saying, I think in Interview of Winter is Coming, like he knows he could just like people are shit out of luck, basically, is how he said it. But he has said, I think I recall him saying if it was like the Jordan situation, because Jordan knew he was sick for quite a while, and while Robert Jordan was very adamant, but he would pull through, but he would manage. At a certain point in time, he knew it was terminal, and arrangements started to be made to kind of prepare the way for someone else to write it. But George has indicated, like, if he knew that he had some terminal illness, he would probably try to make arrangements. I know of a couple of writers, one or two writers that he has in other contexts talked about as people who might be able to write adjacent material if he didn't have time to do it. And I would guess that writer or writers are the people that he would then approach and say, hey, I can't finish, just can you get it over the into the touchdown zone?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if something just happens, I don't think he has like a ream of notes, like here's my full outline of my plan. I don't think that exists.
Okay, there's no GRRM master plan sheet.
I don't think so. I recall some of the minions saying that when Game of Thrones was finishing up, that they insisted that he tell them what he intended. So that, well, you know what? I mean, I guess technically there might be, in the sense that George did meet with Benioff and Weiss and Brian Cogman. And Cogman, I know, had a laptop where he was furiously taking notes, where George explained his vision of the rest of the show. That might act as a master plan, but I'm not even sure if that's technically property of George R.R. Martin at this stage, or is property of HBO, if it exists any longer, if they deleted it. I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I hope it doesn't happen.
I do as well.
That would break me, man. That'd be just like, what? There's nothing good left in this world. Okay, so that's a good way to jump into one theory I hear from a lot of fans is he has a hard time finishing Winds of Winter because the reception to the final season of Game of Thrones was so poor. Do you think there's any truth to that? Because the theory goes, well, this is obviously his end stage, right? And now he knows everyone hates it, so he can't do it.
I think people hate. So first, what I know about the final season is a secondhand. I stopped watching after the fifth season.
I don't blame you.
I know the general gist of things because Linda kept on top of it. And I know, but I think for many people it just felt very clumsy and rushed. And maybe if it had not been clumsy and rushed, if it had played out at a pace more like what George intended, it might have worked better. But for example, Danny's turn. I think it's stupid as hell that a bunch of bells would make her go genocidal. Uh, from what I heard, but I've always said, I mean, her final chapter, The Dance of Dragons, is not a positive chapter. She
Mm-hmm.
comes to the conclusion that she's not made for peace. She's made for war and conquest. She's fire and blood. And I think that's going to. So I can see that is an aspect of the story that George has intended. Um, so is it affecting Wisdom Witcher? I don't think so, because as he said, in broad scope, like if you just look at the summary details, they were probably more or less in line with George imagined. But I think the whole nature, the character, the spin on it is completely different. Benioff and Weiss have, increasingly as the show went on, it was quite clear, but they had a very different sort of philosophical view of what was going on. They had a very I don't think in the end they really lined up with what George was going for. So their end thing kind of gives you this idea that this new king is basically almost like this sinister force who's like can see what everyone's doing all the time. He's like, I don't think that's George's idea. So, but yet he probably has something along those lines. So their spin on it was very different. I think their spin on it more than anything is what I think people were objecting to. And I don't think it's affecting George. I think George is really just struggling with lining everything up. And I think he really, really, really wants to put this book at a position where there's one more book. Maybe a little large. It might have to be split into 2 volumes, but it'll be one more book. Because I don't think he wants, I think he can see that if he keeps adding books to a series, that's also it's an endless treadmill, but he can't get out of.
Certainly. Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes do like fan theories, like the theory that actually King Bran at the end of the TV show, that's actually Brendan Rivers, and he's actually now king, and it was just a very, very long con on his part.
Yeah, it's a funny theory. I can almost guarantee it's not what's happening. It's just somebody who has read. I've read pretty much everything George has written. I feel like we don't really discuss the books directly. Like I don't want to know spoilers from him. I don't ask him things, but I know I just have a sense of the kind of storyteller he is, and that isn't part of his story. Like a character that he introduced directly in the 5th book is actually the guy who's gonna take over at the end. This just in the sense of it's a very unsatisfying story, other than it's kind of ironic, like long concepts. But then you have to kind of it just doesn't fit George's sensibility as a writer, I think.
True. He does for most of his books, it seems like he likes to have a imperfect ending, but ultimately there's kind of like a final happy note to it.
Yeah, bittersweet is how George has discussed it. It's going to be bittersweet, the ending. So I have a particular vision of how the end should be, which to me feels very like George. I don't know what's going to happen, but it involves Brad, but it doesn't involve him being king in King's Landing. It involves my vision of Brad is that the title for the last book is A Dream of Spring, right? And I think imagine that the last chapter is Brad still alone in the cavern under the weirwood in the roots, dreaming of spring and seeing his siblings who are still alive, seeing those who have died or remembering them, and he's alone. And to me, it's like that would be bittersweet. Like life goes on, but he's the last green seer. He will never directly be with his family again. That makes me feel like that would be a bittersweet ending. But I don't know. I can see other paths. That George could go with.
Well, you're wired in hot to the fan community. I mean, you've been there from the ground level. But so do you ever watch channels like David Lightbringer or like Alt Shift X? Sometimes I feel like the theories they come up with are just like so out there. I'm curious to hear what you think of that.
I do not watch. Yeah, I don't watch. Do I? Who's the last person? I sometimes watch the podcast that people I've been guests with, the more kind of it's like History of Westeros. There's the Boiled Leather Audio Hour with Stephen Saucett and Sean T. Collins, which is very good and very insightful. But I mean, yeah, there are creators that are definitely they're having fun. Is the best I can say. They're having fun. They're not. They're completely off of their own, off the reservation. In my opinion, I won't name names
Okay.
because
You're being
but
nice.
there are
It's fine.
people who are just there are definitely out there theories that are like taking stuff from, especially stuff from the World of Fire, to be honest, to like if this some of this stuff was actually important to a Song of Ice and Fire, George would have included it in a Song of Ice and Fire. He didn't imagine when he's writing a Song of Ice and Fire, but he would write the World of Ice and Fire, right? That was something that came out, and a lot of it is just he's just having fun with the form of these are stories from that a maester has cataloged and heard, and these are what sailors say about these far off places. He's just having fun of it. There's a lot of homaging to Lovecraft, to Robert E. Howard, and it's not. It's a part of the world, like the oily black stone. That's a real thing in this universe, but it's not a thing that's important to a Song of Fire. As this Lightbringer guy, I think he has a lot to do with, like the astronomy and like constellations. I mean, we tried to get George to do a constellation, like can we do like a star map, like a Maester star map? Because he's named constellations, he's named planets, the 9 Wanderers, and so on. So yeah, that'd be kind of cool to have it. And George didn't want to, he wasn't interested in it. And to me, that's like, okay, it's not because he reveals secrets, it's because it's not. It's just color. It's just part of a color of a setting to have some of these details. It's not really relevant to anything thematic or storytelling wise. I would be very, very shocked if some of the theories related to this came true.
It is fascinating to think about that in the time, because we've had this hang time between Dance of Dragons and Winds of Winter.
Yeah.
Like, people have come up with just so much of their own fan theories and content, and it's some of it's really crazy. But it reminds me of I'm Christian. It reminds me of people who are like reading, like trying to grab new meaning from like scripture. Or like Kabbalah. People have said this a lot about Kabbalah, and they're trying to extract like entire things. They just aren't there, but they're kind of like torturing the text to get out of it. That's what it reminds me of. I think I watch some of the lore videos, and I get a chuckle out of them. I think it's fun to like imagine, like, okay, so this reference to Lovecraft, that means that the deep ones are going to play a big role in Winds of Winter. And I'm like, probably not. But
yeah, no, I think it's fun to make the theories and so on. I just when as soon as you started to connect, and this is gonna happen because in Also Always a Fire, because of this, that's the part where it's like, no, this is part of the world, but it's not part of the story of Also Always a Fire. Also Always a Fire story is a very limited story of a particular slice of time, particular events that doesn't have to connect to every piece of lore that's out there. A lot of the lore is really just color.
yeah. Do you think Game of Thrones, the TV show, could it have been saved if they had said, okay, so you can't just do this in 2 seasons and be done, David and Weiss. You got to stretch this out 3 seasons, 4 seasons. Do you think it would have been better? Or do you think it was going to be still doomed?
I mean, a lot of people liked it as it was. So even I knew people who knew David and Dan who were there on the set who said, I think by the 3rd season, like they're exhausted. They're already exhausted. They were brand new to show running, both of them. They were incredibly passionate about it. They were incredibly involved. Like one of them was there every single day, troubleshooting, answering questions. Benioff handed me his headphones when he during a filming of a scene where he was kind of done because he got to rush out and deal with something. So here, you have my headset so you can listen into the dialogue. And so this was the I think it's like the 3rd episode where we were at the Night's Watch set, and that's where Mormont is reading out the assignments to the recruits. So that was awesome. But they were exhausted. So I understand. I mean, their desire to wrap it up and faster than George thought they should wrap up could it have been improved? I mean, very recently, Kit Harington said, we were destroyed. We were all, I don't think we could have, he thought that they couldn't do anymore. And obviously, he in particular, he's been very open. It was very, very tough on him getting that show done. So I don't know. It'd be nice to think that in the ideal universe where everyone was being paid very, very richly, so much so that they did not mind being in Belfast and Croatia for a few more years, that they could have managed it. But I think maybe if they had absolutely 100% understood that they were finishing it, they could have gone with George. Like, George, we want to try and do the best sort of compressed version that we can. Where are the storylines that we can cut? Help us figure out how to squeeze this down to fit into this many seasons so we could actually get this done. Maybe that would have worked, but maybe George would be he couldn't see the way. I mean, even when I posted about this thing with House of the Dragon, I said, it's entirely possible. I don't think so, but it's entirely possible that some of George's concerns and how he thinks the show should be are just wrong from a TV perspective. Like, yes, he's got experience, but he could be wrong, and it would be prudent for them, Brian Condal or Benioff and Weiss, to just say, we can't do that, George. We're going to do our own thing. I don't think so, but it's possible, but that's how they saw it. And 4 more seasons. I just don't see which. Some of the actors would have been happy to do it. I think some of the actors, like Peter Dinklage in particular, I think, and Kit Harington, I think it would have been very hard for them to continue.
It almost killed Emilia Clarke.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm amazed she filmed that last season. That was...
Yeah, no, incredible. I had no idea about that story. I interviewed her. That was the second season. I think it was the third season where her aneurysm happened. So it hadn't come yet, but and it was amazing to interact with all these young actors, and they were so enthusiastic. Emilia and Kit and John Bradley, they all had they had all read the books, and they all had notes and thoughts and things. And my first interview with an actor was over email with John Bradley, and he just wrote voluminously responses. And I think he said later, "Oh, yeah, my agent said, next time you do an interview like that, make sure you get paid for it." Yeah, everyone was very enthusiastic and optimistic. And I think, it did well for HBO, and it did well for a lot of these actors. A lot of these actors have gone on to bigger and better things. Some, Kit and Rose Leslie met on a set and ended up getting married and having kids. This is a lot of good has come out of it, and and it's brought up, tens of millions of new readers for George. So on the whole, I can't complain too much, but I'm never going to watch those seasons after season 5. I think probably will not watch past season 4, to be honest. I haven't rewatched it.
Is the Hard Home episode in season 5? I can't remember. Or is it season 6? I'm sure my viewers know.
That might be 5. I think that's 5.
That in my opinion was the last great episode.
That was a fantastic episode. That was Miguel Sapochnik, who did who did mostly a great job with House of the Dragon. He was also the guy responsible for the incredibly dark scenes in the first season, but he's a great director. I just don't let him near the Lutz anymore.
He wants to get really good use of his HDR TV. He's like,
No, it was very interesting. I actually got into the weeds on that one. There was a guy who has a YouTube channel just looking at HDR TVs, and he kind of directly looked at that one. He said, you have this thing called nits about how bright things are, and you're not supposed to tune to less than 50 nit as a base minimum. And for some reason, they were under 1 nit. And most TVs just couldn't handle it. They would think, we're going to dim because it's so dark, and then people couldn't see anything. And I'm sure it worked perfect on a studio monitor. Of course it worked perfect on a studio. They're made for that, but people don't have studio monitors. But it was a mistake. I don't know if they've gone around. I think they fixed it. I think they did something to fix it
afterwards. They did some kind of patch. We now patch TV shows, apparently.
Yeah.
Okay. HBO has a lot of shows planned. Like a lot?
Well, a lot of shows under consideration that they're spending money on to develop and see whether for every. I mean, we're now at for every show that's gone to the air, 6 or 7 have died. So we don't know how it's going to go.
Did you ever get any insight into some of these failed shows? Like there was the one they paid a ton of money on. That was led by Sarah Hess. It was supposed to be like an origin story for the Pact and the others, et cetera, et cetera.
Not Sarah Hess. That was Jane Goldman. Did Sarah Hess work on it? Maybe she worked on it. I don't remember that, but Lynn and I actually worked a little bit. We consulted on that one. It was supposed to be the long night stuff leading up to it, so very, very far back to the first men. Some images leaked fairly recently, but kind of cool. But I think the story was they spent like $30 million on it, and then I don't know why it didn't go forward. And I know what Georgia said, they haven't showed it to me. I don't know. He doesn't know. And to me, it's like, are we not showing it to him because they're embarrassed that it came off so poorly? Because I mean, Jane Goldman's a good writer. But at the same time, as I think James Hibbard covered in his book, "The Fire Not Kill a Dragon" or something about Game of Thrones, George had big reservations about that particular one, and he let them know, and they went ahead with it anyway. So he had reservations about the idea, about it kind of digging into the lore and kind of creating its own lore, because he has a certain amount, but he doesn't have what they needed necessarily. And in fact, that's why we got brought in. They wanted to have this, in House of Dragons, there's the painted table in Dragonstone, which is this table carved as a map of Westeros. They wanted to do like a precursor to it. They were calling it the White Table, so I assume it was like a weirwood table, which would show the boundaries of all the 100 kingdoms of the First Men back then. And they were asking us, can we help them come up with the boundaries and who the houses were? So we worked several days on that, basically. And if the show had gone forward, maybe we would have consulted more. It was very cool. It was fun, kind of ponder. But at the end of the day, it's us using our knowledge that any fan who's read The Worlds of Fire and has gone for the Snowflake Marketing Collection and things could have come up with as well. So it's not like it's official, but I guess they wanted the imprimatur, somebody who was an expert kind of helping them. So we did that. It's very cool. And I know, people said, oh, George hated it. But that in 2019 was the WorldCon was in Dublin, and then there was the EuroCon in Belfast, and George actually went and visited the set with his assistants and so on. So he wanted to see it. He wanted to look at it close up. He was interested. But and then Hibbert had some other stories about some crazy stuff. Like the someone pitched a story about the 7 being kind of like a A-team style squad of people who, and then someone else had a pitch where Aegon the Conqueror was actually a drunk idiot who basically his sisters kind of made him look great, but he was actually just a jock who was constantly drunk. I'm glad they didn't go. But at a certain point, as I said, after Blood Moon, I think Boyce and I think Richard Plepper was still around. They said, you know what? From now on, we need him more involved. We need him to kind of tell us, is this worth going after, and this is not going after.
Yeah, and he has like the unique relationship, because I don't think any author, they pretty much want all control. And even though they don't have to give him any control, because he signed over all the TV film rights.
Yeah, I mean, even still, technically, he does not have control. But they are now basically saying, like, your advice matters a lot to us, and we'll act or not act on what to do. I mean, as I said, the Dance of Dragons was his pitch. He brought Ryan Condal on board to be the showrunner for it. He worked with Ryan to kind of break down that first season. So he was very involved in that. And the other thing he pitched was, in particular, was Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So again, they're kind of going into things that he's kind of championed. He's interested in some of the others. He's talked about very positively of his interactions with the person that's working on the 10,000 ships, the Dornish or the Nymeria and the Rhoynar.
That would be cool.
Well, yeah, that would be cool. I think that'd be great. Although I think that one was reasonably well. It's probably an animated project as well. Actually, that's animated rather than live action. You got Matt and Tomlin working on Aegon the Conqueror again, trying another stab at it. During the Conquest, it has the same challenges as House of Dragons. You got 3 huge dragons. You got a lot of battles, and how do you put that into the budget, especially if Warner Bros. Starting to tighten the belt on what they can do.
And it seems like the kind of content that they want more of the dramatic moments that in his stories. They're not going for, because I was like, well, maybe they could do something with Jaehaerys, but his is kind of, I don't know, a little more tame maybe.
Yeah, there's some dramatic moments, but I mean, there's the family drama side of it was very. George will be the first to admit a lot of I Claudius derived things, like the whole thing with Sarah. It's very I Claudius. Yeah, I always pondered like where are the stories. We did a couple of episodes years back about like what could successors be, and Nymeria was definitely one of them. The Summer Isles has been completely ignored by the TV show. Basically, it'd be kind of cool to. George has some cool stories there. The founding of Bravos kind of have that side of things. Could be, and then this in Westeros. I thought like it sounds cheesy when you say it, like a young Tywin Lannister. Like Tywin had a very dramatic life to start with, right?
Reigns of
a lot of
Castamere.
turmoil in his reign, and you obviously get to see the reigns of Castamere firsthand, and that could be a cool one. I don't know. I don't think they've ever pitched it, but I thought it would have been pretty cool.
I think it would be.
We'll see. We'll see where it goes. I mean, with Night of the Seven Kingdoms, there's 2 more stories and that are done, so they in theory could do those. And George has at least partially completed one, and maybe he'll complete. And then I think he sounded like he might be willing to allow them to kind of fill in the gaps. Like there's this whole in the second story, we know that before we get to that second story, they spend some time in Dorne. And like George might allow them to kind of write out that story or do that story, so that might be a fun possibility. Yeah.
Okay, we've gone through most of the stuff I thought I would ask, which is really cool, by the way. Thank you for doing this, Elio.
My pleasure.
Okay, so I kind of want to talk about, how do I put this? You and your wife, and the media, not a big fan of yours. And I was researching this a lot when I was getting ready for the interview, because everyone's like, oh, because half the people are like, they're these terrible monsters. They're the dark puppet masters. They're preventing George from finishing his books or whatever crazy thing. And then I look into it, you guys you're very reasonable. You come off as any typical nerd that I've ever known that just likes their fantasy books too much. You're like, well, I just want to be like the book. Be like the book, please. And I'm like, you can't do that. That's terrible.
I think social media has made things a lot uglier than it has to be. I think there's a lack of nuance sometimes, and a lack of willingness to listen to people and like just take them at face value. We've gotten into it sometimes as other parts of fandom. For the most part, I think the people have like there's a certain group on the internet who has a very like nothing good to say about us, and for the most part they're just repeating what other people have told them, or they're taking their source of information is extremely one-sided. I think most people who directly interact with us know that like Linda draws a lot more ire than I do, I suppose, because she's very vocal about her protests, and she doesn't accept being bullied, and she will flame people who attack her, and she has no problem doing so. She was always not professional. She's a fan first and foremost, and if you want to attack her, then she's gonna attack back. I am not that type normally, but our opinions are. I'm very comfortable with our opinions about all sorts of things related to the world that George has depicted and how best to depict it. In particular, it's obviously very sensitive, but race has been an aspect of this where people are
Yeah.
just absolutely convinced that we're racists. And I said with House of the Dragons, like, there's a reason why, just as a concept, like the Valorians being played by black actors doesn't work, because the Valyrians are basically Aryan white supremacists. They, so much so that they will marry sibling to sibling and cousin to cousin to try and preserve the purity of their blood. That's very eugenic and Nazi-ish. And people really think about it, right? Why the show went a different way, and I really hailed Condal and Sapochnik because they were very honest. Like I said, we have a global audience, we have a very diverse audience, and we want to make sure that everyone feels like they've got us, they've got someone that they recognize. I absolutely no problem. I like that honesty rather than the common one is, oh, well, this was no other actor was as good as this person. Why? There's a lot of actors who are good as somebody, right? They made a choice, and it's fine. But people kind of get very, if you point it out, like, if someone said to me, why don't they cast Sebastian Stan as the next Black Panther? So what's obviously you can't have the Black Panther be a white guy. It's not right. I mean, sure, it's all made up. Wakanda doesn't exist. They could fill it however they want, but it is the world is of Wakanda is, but this is a proud Black African nation in the heart of Africa that represents this vision of a prosperous Afrofuturistic place with heroes and values and so on. I think that's important. So I understand it, and I understand why people look at it like weirdly and say, "Oh, why are you pointing it out? If you don't, if it's just." But when we point out all sorts of things about world building, if anyone's watched our reviews, we used to write for Game of Thrones, like we would write a review and a recap, and they would do a book to screen, and we would just go over everything that they changed from the books, just listing everything, like in exhaustive detail. It matters to us. It's not like it's going to stop us from watching it, but like we think it's important for people to know, like, this is what the book does, and this is what the TV show does.
I don't blame you. I mean, I grew up around fantasy literature fans. They're very anal retentive about the stuff they love. That's pretty typical.
Yeah, I have got no problem with that. I felt, as I said, Steve Toussaint was great in the first. I don't have. It's like, to me, if you want to say we're racist, you have to say it, because to me, a racist is a person who thinks not that another person can do something, but you think because they are somehow inferior. I don't have that. We don't have that concept at all. To me, it's not racist. Like, if someone told me, hey, why can't another marginalized person, like a Native American actor, play Martin Luther King Jr. in a biopic? I could see it on a play or something, but as a film that's trying to be a biopic, like, shouldn't it be a Black man playing or Martin Luther King Jr.? It's this thing that I just don't understand why people get so wound up about it. Whether when we are consistent, like we were very consistent about the world building stuff. Linda's complained about the lack of purple eyes on the Targaryens. Like, we'll point out everything. Like, we know there aren't purple-eyed people on Earth, and we understand when they say, well, it's hard with the contact lenses or just CGI eyes, but we can still point it out. I don't know. It's grown very tiresome sometimes to have people keep hammering on it when I know that, you can go look at Linda's posts. She's never taken down any of the things she's posted. People try to act like she's, you have to find this one page to find it. It's all there. She doesn't regret anything. But like, we wanted to see Sorella Sand, who is a half Summer Islander, on the show, and we didn't get her. We wanted to see Shataya. We wanted to see Jala Barzo. I lobbied Brian Cogman, please have Brown Ben Plum, and please get Clark Peters to play him. It'd be awesome. I love Salvador Stan. He's not a Black character in the books. He's a Liceti Valyrian. But Lucy Masmati was fantastic. My favorite sort of tertiary character in that show. He just made me laugh so much. So it feels like it's a losing battle. I'm sure there will be people who will come across this and will clip and go and mock and insist that I'm a racist. But It's just tiresome.
You can never win with them. Like I
Yeah.
I think I feel it interesting because I see this a lot also with like gaming, especially people who are really interested in the history topics. This comes up a lot.
Yeah.
I get a feeling though that we're mostly through whatever this cultural moment we've been in. I think we're kind of getting past a lot of it because people are just so tired of it. But it was like I was just doing research for you, and it was like, well, they're so horrible, and terrible. So I was like, okay, so what's so terrible? And, I clicked through. I'm like, oh, this is nothing. This is nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. I understand why people are very sensitive about it and why they get upset. And Linda has been harsh to some people who have labeled her racist because to her it's nonsense, and she uses very salty language sometimes. I will not apologize for her on that. I'm very honest. I wouldn't do it, but she has the right to say what she wants. So when people are being mean to her, she's mean back. But I think you kind of divide it. Like you have to divide it into like there's the world building purists, and we want to see the world George described. There's the fighting fire of fire when it comes to trolling and attacking them back. Like you have to, like the big issue I have there is like if you look at her Tumblr, like most of the people who were saying stuff to her have deleted their Tumblrs. What they've said is lost to the ether. She didn't quote them, she didn't tag them, she would just respond to them in a salty way, but she wasn't, rustling armies of her fans while there was a group of people, including the runner of a now defunct site, who were very much ganging up on her because she had wrong opinions in her view, and the bullying thing doesn't go with her. And then the last aspect is sort of for her when it comes to the whole racial aspect, like depicting characters how they're supposed to look. She wants characters to look how George describes them, but she also has a bit of a concern about the moment where you're talking about the sort of the larger political thing, like when you can tell that somebody's doing it for it's just like there's a mandate of a political thing. Like, if you wanted, why, if you say you love this world and its world is unfortunately a world, or fortunately, or whatever you want to see it as a world where the author has very clear ideas of how everyone looks, and they say, well, we don't need to adhere to that. I mean, to me, a good example is something like Netflix's One Piece. As far as I can tell, everyone looks really close to how a creator depicted them, right? No one's complaining about that, right? If they deviated from that, people would be upset. And I don't see what's wrong with the. At the end of the day, it's just nonsense, and we have not engaged. We've engaged much less with it. I kind of on Reddit sometimes I'll pop up and kind of explain our position again and try and make it clear that most people are operating off a very one-sided account of things. But people who have decided they know everything, as you say, there's no reaching them, there's no being them. But I'm very comfortable with my positions and views. I don't consider myself a racist because I want to see canonically black characters on the show. I want to see a Summer Isles show. I don't see what's wrong with that.
Yeah, and there is some weird thing about like if you as a fan want something to adhere to it like how it is or how it is historically, there's something wrong with that, or like it's some kind of veiled thing. I just fundamentally disagree with that. I think a lot of people do, but
and I'll say it's not just like I don't have a problem with like I don't know if you watched The Great with Nicholas Hoult and with Elle Fanning. The Great was it came right in and told you this is not really history. It's about Catherine the Great. It was wonderful, fantastic. They cast all sorts of actors, Asian, South Asian, black actors to play Russians. Totally fine. We love that show. That was fantastic. History. There are shows like I don't know Bridgerton. Like they're not trying to be history, right? They're using a historical setting. And I got no problem with it. What would be really cool? I saw a scholar of African history kind of talking about how there was an actual aristocratic European-style court with a black king and black nobility in Haiti around the same time of Bridgerton. I've never seen that story on television. Maybe there's a reason for it. It'd be really cool to see a story that's actually historically grounded, that tells us something about history that people don't know about, rather than taking stories that are, Northern European stories about English Regency and just mixing up the races just because. right? But Bridgerton is a huge hit, and I've got no problem with it. It's not trying to be history. It's trying to be a good, fluffy romance, I think. We watched the Decameron, same thing. Not as good a show, I'm afraid, as The Great. They kind of tried to do, it was Netflix's own try at The Great, I think. Tony Hale was great. Fun actors, but it just didn't really gel together. But I don't have a problem with that either, right? To me, it's like, there's a very limited set of shows. And to me, it's like fantasy shows where you say, oh, we love the world this person created, but we're not going to depict the world he created because it's not appropriate. Like, don't depict it. Go depict something that is appropriate. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I wouldn't be sad if they said, you know what, George's world is too problematic. We're not going to adapt it. Okay. I mean, if that's your view, fine. Go and do something that isn't problematic. From your viewpoint. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a very strange time. But maybe it's getting better. I don't know. I feel like from my interactions on Reddit and so on, it comes up less that people seem much more kind of on side. Like they don't see the problem with it. So that's I don't and a lot of people are clearly they tell us how much they're fans and they love the work we do and keep doing it. So I'm happy. It just frustrates me because I sit on my hands on it. So we kind of were suggested like the best way to get it them lower, just don't talk about it. And yes, I guess so. But it basically just leaves the narrative unchanged. Like anytime anyone wants to dig it up, they'll just go back to the same thing. And so I said, I'm kind of tired of being quiet. I'll say my piece. I'll say our side of it. And if you kind of insist that you still know the truth, then fine. But I've said I feel like I've done my part.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's kind of like the dark that you work in fandoms, and unfortunately, it's kind of like the dark side of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of dark sides. I mean, there is that dark side. I mean, there's a toxicity of fandom that is a thing. I mean, some people take it too seriously and they get too wound up about it. Star Wars is, even Star Wars. I know I watched like The Empire Strikes Back as a kid in the movie theaters. I was very young. I was born in '78. I was like 4 years old. I think like my first movie going experience that I remember, I think, was going to see Empire, or maybe Return of the Jedi, and one of those two. But I think that a lot of people are and I'm not happy with everything they've done in the Disney era. But I understand what trying to do. When I think about it, like Star Wars is interesting because I'm very much like the original trilogy guy. The prequels I don't, and the sequels, but Andor's fantastic. Andor's amazing. So we got that. So I'm happy. But there's so much other stuff that I never had any interaction with. I didn't care about. I did a little bit of the expanded universe stuff. Like I read like the Timothy Zahn trilogy, which I absolutely love. I would love to see that adapted, even though it's not canonical anymore. Because to me, like that's the story I kind of wanted to see is sort of the New Republic struggling to manage rather than the New Republic is gone. We're back to being rebels against the Empire again. Fine, but I do like the games and the cartoons. I did really do the cartoons over like the very first Clone Wars. But these people have very different experiences of Star Wars than I do, who are Clone Wars kids who grew up on that, and that's the stuff. And the prequels, like there's so many people who absolutely adore the prequels now. Okay, I don't get it, but you could love what you love. That's not a problem. But why be toxic about someone else loving something you know? Like I don't have a problem with anyone loving season 8. They're allowed to love season 8 of Game of Thrones. I didn't watch it. I don't know. Doesn't sound like I would have liked it. But it's fine that people love it.
Fair enough.
There's people who don't have this feeling like, oh, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you if you love something that I don't love. And why?
I don't have the answer to that, unfortunately.
It puzzles me. I've been in fandom for a long time. I know people have issues with the Rings of Power. I'm not watching the Rings of Power. I'm like a huge Tolkien fan, but I'm not watching the Rings of Power because if it doesn't have at least Christopher Tolkien involved, I'm not interested. He's unfortunately he has passed away, and he definitely was not involved. But there are people who like it. Great, good. hopefully it goes well. I've heard things I do not like, but if you like it, you like it.
Okay, well, we can end on a positive note. So do you seem to be more of a tabletop kind of role-playing gamer. Do you play video games? Do you ever check out like mods or games for Game of Thrones? Because there are several pretty good ones.
I was just talking to some of the guys who are working on the Crusader Kings 3
Yes.
mod. Actually,
Yes,
yes,
I'm
they
addicted to
I
this
got a
game.
little sneak peek of some stuff coming up from them. They're very they it's very funny. I don't know if this mod has it, but the second mod, the CK2 mod had it, where someone basically went through our game and we have this database of all the characters on the game, and we had all these names of characters, and basically all the names of these characters that we had in our database in that era, from Darren the First through Baylor, and now into Aegon the Unworthy, have shown up as characters in the CK2 mod. I don't know. So it was very fun. We had that one player who plays Dermot Corgray, who kind of would always go with like play himself, because there was a Dermot Corgray in the Crusader Kings trees, basically, and then end up, oh yeah, I've managed to run, taking over Westeros and sit on the Iron Throne or whatever. But that's cool. I have personally, I did a little bit with CK2. I haven't personally seen CK3. I know that there's the Minecraft Westeros people who've done a fantastic job of kind of recreating Westeros in Minecraft.
Yeah, it's mind-bending what they've accomplished.
Yeah, that's really cool to see fans having to do so much cool stuff. I used to game a lot. I game very little now, but the two games I have played most recently were Hades, which did the roguelike game, fantastic, just amazing game. Just great art, great story, great kind of use of the Greek mythos, great gameplay. And then Cyberpunk 2077, that one really is probably my favorite all-time game now. I think I've done over 200 hours into that one. I've done like 3 playthroughs, and I'm planning to do a 4th at some point in time. Same story. I know they obviously have Phantom Liberty as the expansion, but it's just that, I told people, like, prior to this, so the last RPG I played was, I think, Wizardry 7, Crusader of Dark Savant, from like 93, I think.
Oh, wow.
So I went a long time out playing RPGs, really. And I know some people want to say that Cyberpunk is not an RPG, whatever. But yeah, I love the world. I love the everything about it. They did a fantastic job.
It is an excellent game. I agree. It really holds you. Yeah, the CK3 AGOT mod is, it's great.
Yeah, they're really serious about it, and they're really. I just love their attention to the world. They're trying to fit in all the historical events and the characters, and it's just really cool. That's what I love to see. I love seeing fans doing great stuff. There's on Reddit, there's the Imaginary Westeros, where people are doing their fan art and things. And fan art is one area where George is like totally cool with. He's not a fan of fan fiction in his world, as such, but fan art, people, I know Paris, his wife, wished, like, where's the filk? That's the filk is the Spanish folk music, where you take like old folk music and you change the lyrics to fit, like there's a legend. There's a legend of a take on Forever Young, which is called Errol Young, which is about Errol Young from Tolkien, and so she wants to see Filk about Westeros. George has probably did some songs. Obviously, there's the Bear and the Maiden Fair, and there's actually a great Spanish fans did a wonderful performance in the Spanish translation of that one. That was quite interesting. But yeah, no, it's really cool to see fans doing cool fan stuff. I'm also not personally, I don't check out fan fiction. I'm not interested in it. I don't think you should do it without permission of the author, but other people disagree. It's fine to disagree.
That is an interesting opinion. That's a kind of an older opinion. That does sound like, because that was the standard opinion like back in the 90s, but it's not now.
Yeah, I'm not. George's position now is like, it's too much. I can't. He doesn't care anymore. Basically, not that he doesn't care, but like he can't do anything about it. Practically, it doesn't. So he doesn't approve of it. He doesn't want to see it. He don't want to hear about it. But if you do it, just whatever. He's not gonna come after you. I still don't like it. I just think I'm very much of a permission person when it comes to these things.
So last question. Are you pretty excited? Are you positive about the future of this franchise, interacting with it, everything to come?
Um, Question. Yes. I mean, I'm curious to see the third season. I know there's some really cool things coming. I want to see the Battle of the Gullet. I think Ryan showed the fourth episode, the Rook's Rest episode. He's really good at that specific kind of thing. The sort of building the tension and kind of creating this action-packed spectacle. He's very good at that, and I think that's going to come out really well there. I am apprehensive of other aspects. We'll see if George's intervention worked, if the story goes uh and to see I'm curious to see, like, I'd love to see an animated show. I think animation is woefully ignored. And I know it can be expensive for the return, for the viewerships you get, but like something like Netflix's Arcane shows that if you do a really good animation with a really good story, people will watch it. Cyberpunk Edge Runners actually was fantastic as well, actually. Oh, that song coming out. I love that song from the original game, and then when they had it as a centerpiece of the show, it was like, oh, perfection. But so I'm excited. Like they're talking about doing the 9 voyages of Corlys Valorian. Animation will suit that perfectly. 10,000 ships. I guess animation could suit that perfectly. So yeah, my bigger concern, I guess, is just all the drama around Warner Bros. Discovery. The UBD is having so much trouble right now. Whether they can right the ship, whether it's going to have an impact, a negative impact, I don't know. I kind of have to cross our fingers and just kind of hope that it comes out all right. But I'm hopeful for the shows, and I'm hopeful that we will get the Winds of Winter, if not next year, then in some following year. I know George is trying as best he can with all the other things floating around in the George R.R. Martin universe. But feel a day doesn't go by where I don't talk about these books for 25, 26 years now. Every day, there's something about it that I can still find things to discuss about, to argue about. I've received tens of thousands of hours of entertainment from this series of books and everything around it. I am hopeful to get every bit more what I can, but I hope I'll enjoy it all. But if I don't get any more, if something were to happen, I've gotten back so much from it. And I think a lot of other fans feel the same way. They've gotten so much back from the TV show, from the books, that it's been very special, I think, for a lot of people and their lives.
All right. Well, Elio, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. You were very candid, and I like talking to you. You remind me of my people, my kind, the nerds.
Oh, thanks, Peter. It's been great fun. I actually, I have to say this very randomly. I believe I was looking at your channel. I saw you spoke, and I never must imagined I would be on a podcast where Teal Lorenz was also on. As I have no negative opinion. I just know, but she's kind of a lightning. Kind of draws a lot of attention.
True.
But it's just kind of cool that you kind of got this channel where so many diverse people get to kind of speak and talk with you.
That's right. You never know who's going to show up. It could just be anybody. You have no idea. I have no idea. I should probably be a bit more responsible about a direction, but I keep it fun.
But I've enjoyed it very much, though. Thank you very much for giving me time to kind of just
go
me too. On and say my piece.
Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch CultureScape today. This show would not be possible without viewers like you. Thank you so much to my editor, Chris Hollywicki, who makes me look way more competent than I actually am. Thank you to Young Voices, a journalism advocacy organization, for helping put the podcast together, and Bain Books Publishing, an imprint of Simon & Schuster. And until next time, my friends, keep geeking out. Hey there, gang! If you are a fan of CultureScape, and I know you are, and want to get involved in supporting the show, well, now you can! By joining the CultureScape Patreon, you'll help support me and my editor Chris as we create the show and produce more quality journalism. For just $5 or $10 a month, you not only help us, but get access to our exclusive members-only Discord. You'll also get to vote on and suggest new guests for the interview. So if you are a fellow weeb and love CultureScape, then come join us today on Patreon.